Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Adam Green here with No More News. Thank you all for joining me today, Tuesday, April 22nd, 2025. Got a huge show. New guest interview. Going to be discussing the return to paganism with Æsiric Media. I discovered him recently. He's been crushing it in these debates, talking about paganism, Christianity, debating with Christians. He's been really a big inspiration and white pill for me. So I wanted to get him on as soon as I saw him. I followed him when I heard him talking. He's a smart guy. Really seems to get things. And then I saw him on Red Ice the other day. Henrik beat me to it. So I enjoyed their interview as well. And wanted to get him on and chat about the return to paganism. What's up, Æsiric? How you doing?
Doing well. Very well.
So I was happy to hear at the beginning of your interview with Henrik that you're a former Christian and a former Ortho bro and Catholic. So we won one over. It is possible. And now you're one of our greatest soldiers.
Well, I really appreciate the compliment, but you know, the fact of the matter is that once when you see it for what it is, right, you break out of that matrix, there's no going back. And you know, there's some people who, you know, just drop spirituality altogether, you know, because when you encounter that your faith system is a scam, is a psyop, is manufactured and there to control you, you know, I can understand the reaction of just dropping spirituality and viewing all spirituality this way. For me, I held on to spirituality, except I chose the path, which is, what did my people believe before Christianity? And investigating it, looking into it, and finding that it actually connected with me a lot more than the Bible that I believed for years and years and years. And when I asked people who've been in this faith for a long time, elders, what they communicated to me was, this was kind of your blood memory kicking in, right? And you know, these ancient faiths, they're so old that they're ingrained in your blood. So when you encounter them when you encounter them, they connect with you on a much deeper level than just intrigue.
So you were raised Catholic, right? That's what you said.
Yep.
Strong Catholic family. And then you left that and joined Orthodox for a few years. How'd you get out of Orthodox? And then was that the last step? You left Orthodox. What was it that made you leave, not believe anymore, and then start investigating paganism?
Well, essentially, you know, for those of your viewers who haven't watched my interview with Henrik from Red Ice, I was part of a strong Catholic family growing up. In fact, you know, so much so that my father, my grandfather, they would watch reruns of Life is Worth Living by Fulton J. Sheen, right? And, you know, it was just, you know, hardcore Catholic. But here's the thing is that, you know, when that sex abuse scandal broke out, I had to take a real serious look. And it wasn't just that there was, you know, one bad guy. It was institutionally. They were moving people around, paying hush money, and they would send people to the Vatican, which is its own independent country, and hide these evildoers from justice, from being extradited, and things of this nature. So you have to ask the question, which is something that I did, which was, am I going to be a part of and support an organization that does that shit? The answer is no. And so, you know, I became non-religious for a time, and I was asked as a favor to give Christianity one more shot, give it an honest shot. And, you know, I did that. I did my research, and I wanted to get to the origins of Christianity, as Christian as it got without outside influence. And there's a ton. I mean, when I was looking into some of the Catholic saints, I noticed that there were actual pagan gods as Catholic saints, which is really crazy. Like Bridget is the most egregious example. But I also did a video. This was the first video on the channel, Algies. And about halfway through, I talk about Christianized pagan deities, and the elk god Algies is part of this Saint Hubertus legend, and it's actually quite fascinating. So I said, okay, so what is kind of like the pure Christianity, so to speak, not like the strip mall, dancing with snakes, frothing at the mouth type of Christians in the Protestant church, but like, what's kind of the old school, the old school. And so, I went into Eastern Orthodoxy. I took the classes. I was a catechumen, and I was baptized and took my first communion. And I was Orthodox for about 5 years, a little less than 5 years. And then what happened was that I didn't want to be a hypocrite. I said, well, and in retrospect, you're thinking you should have done this first. But in my mind at the time,
what year? Sorry to interrupt. What year are we talking about? Like, how long ago was this that you left Orthodoxy?
That I left Orthodoxy, 2017.
Okay.
So this was 5 years before that. It would be like the 2011, 2012 timeframe. Mm-hmm. And so, what ended up happening was I started reading the Bible, like actually reading it. And there were things in there that were absolutely gross, disgusting, didn't make sense. And then, I try to line it up and do deep dives into it, because that's what I want to do. I want to figure it out. And I would talk to my father of confession about it. And
were you like an internet ortho, bro? Did like internet influencers get you into orthodoxy?
Oh, hell no. And,
Okay.
I look at the likes of Jay Dyer kind of like cringe, because I really hope that that's not what I was like, because I was the guy when I was in Orthodoxy. I would go to church twice a week, once on Wednesday and once on Sunday. I would go to Apocalypse night. I would go to Vespers and First Liturgy, which together, you're standing up for 4 or 5 hours straight, pretty much. And so, I was a part of that. I was friends with deacons. I would go over to their houses. I would go over to my father of confession's house and things of this nature. So I was deeply involved. And my sudden dropout, I mean, a lot of people were like, what the fuck happened? But, in actuality, what it was discovering that this was a foreign god of a foreign land, of a foreign people, and everything that I was told by the priesthood, by the church fathers and stuff like that did not line up with what's going on in the text and where those texts came from. And so for me, I saw it as a scam, as kind of a composite. And if it's a composite, it's not genuine. Mm-hmm. And so that's what ultimately led me out. But there was one particular event, and that particular event revolves around there's Orthodox who have crosses tattooed on their wrists. Sometimes you'll see this, and they're all faded out. And I would ask them, what's the deal with the tats? And they would say that sometimes the Muslims would go and kidnap children, the Orthodox children, and they would force convert them to Islam. And this happens on a regular basis. And so what ended up happening was I asked them, why didn't you, fight back, right? Because if somebody was stealing, children of mine or my neighbor's kids or something like that, we go get them. And I would ask my father of confession about this. And this is the moment. He said, that's not what Jesus wants. He wants us to pray for our enemies. He wants us to bear our cross and follow him, that the more we suffer on earth, the more treasures we earn in heaven. And immediately my blood cried out and was like, no, this is wrong. This is straight up wrong. And you got to leave. and I followed my blood essentially back home. That's my story.
So when you were in the church, you really did believe Jesus was the Son of God and was born a virgin and rose from the dead?
I did. Yes. When I was a Christian, yes.
So just learning that it's like the God does evil stuff and it's Jewish, that's what made you not realize that it wasn't true?
It was, how I describe it now is, you see that it's darkness masquerading as light, that it's evil masquerading as holier than thou. And when you see that, you can't unsee it. Right. For example, I'll give you an example, which is all of the omni traits that is associated with the Trinity comes from Plato. It doesn't come from the Old Testament. For example, in Genesis, in the Garden of Eden, right, where, right after they eat from the fruit tree of the knowledge of good and evil, they cover themselves with leaves and they hide. And then you have Yahweh walking around saying, Adam, Adam, where art thou? It immediately reveals that the omnipresence is made up. It's a later addition, right? And by the way, all knowing can also be like knowing the future, right? And planning accordingly. So when you see things in Genesis like, I regretted making humanity, or in Kings where it says, I regretted making Saul king, and things of this nature,
Or like making Adam and Eve, if you're all knowing, that they're going to take the apple. So you made them, setting them up to fail and then blaming them for it.
Yeah. And it's kind of like, if the whole mission of Jesus from the beginning of time, according to the church fathers, right? If the whole mission is for him to come down, to become manifest, okay, and then to die on a cross, why are we viewing Judas as a villain? Because he set those pieces in motion. If it wasn't for Judas, Jesus wouldn't have been crucified. So why are we viewing him as a villain? That doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't.
And stuff like that. So like, you come across these problems, and then also like the Trinity itself is a massive problem. I've never seen anyone, even when I was a Christian, I never understood it. At the time I coped, right? And you'll see this cope time and time again, where it's a divine mystery. It's not supposed to make sense because he's much higher than we are, right? So it's not supposed to make sense. But the fact that it breaks all the laws of logic, right, is indicative that this is something that's made up and wasn't really thought through. For example, how can three entities be individuals? And by the way, this is true. If you look in the Gospels, the baptism of Jesus, right? You have Jesus in the water, you have Yahweh in the clouds, and you have the Holy Spirit descending like a dove. Those are three individual things. And yet you're going to twist your mind into knots to say that it's one thing. Now, the reason for this is because Old Testament Judaism, there's only one entity, Yahweh. That's it, right? There's only one entity. So how can there be three? Well, you have to twist your mind into knots. And this goes hand in hand with their partnership with Platonism, because the entire essence of what the Trinity actually is metaphysically comes straight out of Plato's Timaeus. A Gnostic informant, shout out to Neil.
He was just telling me about that. He had just told me that recently, that exact thing.
Yeah.
Are you there? I don't hear you.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I just mute my mic for,
So yeah, he was just saying that, and I saw on the Red Ice interview also you mentioned the guy in Greece that built the temple to Zeus, and then the Greek Orthodox priest tried to pressure the government to have him arrested and to get him to not be able to build it. and he did get him arrested. Neil's over there going to do an interview with that guy real soon. He's in Greece.
Oh yeah, no, he's Neil's killing it right now, really killing it. And hopefully he stays safe over there because Greece isn't as safe as it once was.
That's what I was saying. That's what I was talking to him about. And I was asking.
So the local prosecutor and the bishop, the Orthodox bishop, went hand in hand to arrest this guy, and he's an archaeologist. Okay, it's not just some weirdo, right? This guy's real serious. He's really about going back to his ancestral faith and to bring his Greek folk back into Hellenism. Those who are willing, those who hear the call from Zeus, those who hear the call from Athena to come back home to ancestral faith. The thing is that while in Greece today, you have rape gangs, you have murders, you have thefts, you have all of these other crimes. What does the prosecutor do? As soon as the bishop starts, for pardon my language, bitching about the fact that people are saying, hey, we gotta actually have real spirituality here, they focus all of their efforts to shut down this Greek temple to Zeus and Pan right outside of Arcadia. And it reveals that these people are, the accusation, nothing they hate more, right? No, it's actually ancestral faith is what they hate the most and what they try to stamp out. All Abrahamic branches, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam.
Yep. Which I've shown, we show these rabbi video after rabbi of them saying this, and the Christians act like it doesn't exist and just keep repeating there's nothing they hate more than Christianity. Absolutely not true.
Yeah, that's the funniest thing in the world because they team up all the time. In fact, Christians are as Netanyahu pointed out to, what's her face, Pam Bondi, that Christians are their best friends.
Liam
and
Jarrett
kind of like Dennis Prager, you played that clip a couple of times on your shows.
Irish and German
why are you Jews so mad about, Christians supporting them because Jesus is going to come back if he's not going to come back. So they're going to help us forever. Yuck, yuck, yuck. And stuff like that. And that's kind of the name of the game. Absolutely.
So I'll do the power chats, guys. It is on, and I'll play him. He can't hear him though, so I'm gonna have to read him to him. We'll have to get that worked out, figured out. So I'm curious. It seems like you're more like a Nordic pagan, right?
Yep. Yes. So,
and what does that mean? Like, in what way do you believe in the pagan gods?
Well, that's a pretty broad question, but I could summarize it like this. I'm going to follow the path of my ancestors, the path of my blood, and I don't care what anybody thinks about it. I'm going to do my best, and I'm not perfect, and this will be healed over the generations. So I'm not expecting perfection out of what I'm doing in the present, but that these are real entities, the forces behind not just nature, but life for Germanic folk and of Germania, the land. And that, the ancestors and the spirits are, guiding us home. And the legends that are preserved, these are treasures about, and they unlock keys because there's multiple levels. There's multiple levels of these texts to where they reveal a lot about yourself, right? For example, people bring up Ragnarok and, why would you fight if you know you're going to die? Right? Because that's the whole thing. Why continue if there's going to be this great cataclysm? But that's a way to view our own life in a way, right? And I'm not saying that Ragnarok's just a symbol, right? Because that's not what the ancestors believed. But we can apply that concept to our own lives. We know that we are going to die, but we still have a duty and a responsibility to live honorably. And so, you know, because we know that death is inevitable for all of us, right? The reason why the gods fight is the reason why you should fight as well. And that's an application of that principle. You see what I mean? The seeking of wisdom for those who are disciples of Odin, for those who seek out wisdom, no matter where it is, you know, they are in a way emulating Odin. For those who value strength, work out, they are honoring Thor, who, you know, is of strength, right? Your emulation is the highest form of veneration. Freyr, right? Yngvi Freyr, to be fruitful, to be
Sun Zero F
to
Mars
have
$20
fertility,
hail the old gods.
and justice and honor and all of these things, right? So when it comes to how you, because you asked the question, how do you view these gods and goddesses? And I can also say, you know, the spirits of the land and things of this nature. I am going to do my best to believe as my ancestors did, regardless of what anybody says, because that's being true to the old ways. See, if people want to be an atheist, they have to be an honest one. But if you are going to call yourself somebody who follows ancestral faith, you should be true to what you say you believe in. That's at least my opinion. Hopefully that makes sense.
Do you believe in evolution? What about like origin creation stories?
Yeah, so it doesn't give a date as far as the origin of our realm, and it doesn't give an origin date as far as the origin of our people. So wherever you want to put that on the timeline, you know, like I said, there is no like 6,000 years old Earth in these pagan faiths.
The reason I asked about evolution, just to get your your religious views, but also you were talking with Henrik about how, and you played a video that they found a European with some pure European DNA 40,000 years ago in like the Ice Age in northwestern Europe, and you talked about how our people have been Christian for the last 1,000 or 1,700 years, sometime around there, but up to 40,000 years before that, we were pagans and had different beliefs. And also interesting, even before that, because I do believe in evolution. So you talked about elephants and different apes having like shrines and rituals and more, what was it, like funerals and stuff. I thought that was really interesting. And it's a great point. And also to the Christian identity people and all the spurgy schizo Christians that want to say Jesus was white and had blonde hair and the Israelites were really white. Like, look at these maps.
He was the only 6'5", blonde hair, blue-eyed Giga Nord in the Judean desert. Yeah. You know, if that was the case, by the way, all of the Romans would have written about it. What the fuck is this Germanic guy doing in the Judean desert?
Or it would have been in the Bible. Like they would have mentioned that he looks different than everybody else and he doesn't fit in with, all the brown people down there. You look at these maps, though, the way blonde hair and blue eyes is distributed. The more north and west you are, the more blonde hair and blue-eyed people there are. But then you just want to ignore that and say, oh, they were all white, which I believe are traits that evolved over tens of thousands of years also for the schizos, the Christians that want to believe we came from Jacob and Esau, or like the Christian I debated recently, like, oh, we're from Japheth and Ham and Noah, like as if any of that's real. Completely genetically and, archaeologically retarded and nonsense. But this is the type of kookery we have to deal with online, unfortunately.
And by the way, it's just online, and so here's kind of the thing. Most of these Christian LARPs, they are just online. They don't go to the churches. And if they do go to the churches, they get kicked out, like Cory Muller.
Yeah.
Right. Now, not all, obviously, some of them do go to churches and stuff, but the vast majority, these are just pretending to be Christians for attention, for political clout. So they're just talking heads. These are not real movers and shakers online. But here's the thing, is that most people are online. Most of the conversations that get started happen online.
Great guest, great content.
And so it is, though, in some way you can say it's just an online phenomenon, so you can ignore it. The fact is that sometimes what happens online can materialize in real life. So
I'm not worried about it going widespread. I don't think that's going to happen. What I'm worried about is all of these people that are getting caught up in this nonsense could actually become resistance to Zionism or Judaism and Jews or Israel, whatever, if they were just to not worship the God anymore and come up with all of these mental gymnastics in order to keep believing in Jewish religions.
Yeah, I think that's the ultimate last cope, right? Because, we look at the data. What do we see? We see church attendance is in total free fall. Now, not in every single denomination, but in the vast majority of denominations, this is the case. Just last year, around the same time, you remember the German priest rapping, and I said this on Henrik's show. Around that same time, there was an article put out that said, in just 1 year, 2024, in just one nation, Germany, 1 million Germans stopped going to church permanently. Okay. And if that's not just a German isolated event, this is happening all over the West. So, ultimately what we're seeing today in real life versus what's happening online with the, Christ is King, Christ is King, Christ is King, stuff. It's not translating into real life. It's just quarantined online. But the fact that they do make such a big stink about it, the fact that it is astroturfed.
I was just going to say that. I think it's botted and astroturfed.
That what they're going to do is they're going to take those snippets of what these people say and use it as justification for censorship and all the rest of it. So they're playing right into the hands. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. We hear one of the copes, because they're losing the debate. You made this point. The Christians come at us with, you're being divisive, right? They'll say we're anti-white, which is absolutely preposterous and nobody takes serious. But then they'll say we're being divisive. That's because they're losing the debate. Otherwise, they wouldn't be upset. There wouldn't be anybody being divided away if they weren't losing and made look bad. But what's your take on the divide? Mm-hmm.
If they were winning the debate, they'd be cheering them on.
Right.
You know that they would. Everybody knows that they would if they were winning the debate. But because of the fact that, these debates that have taken place on Twitter and other places, it's going all over the internet right now. The fact that the Christian question is being examined and they are losing bad, they have to say, shut it down, shut it down, shut it down. And because it's a cope. Mm-hmm. If the roles were reversed, they would say, why are you running away from the debate? You should just become Christian.
Yeah.
Right. So, pardon me, what was your question again?
About them saying that we're being divisive, what's your response to that?
So for years, pagans have tried to work with Christians for the benefit of our people as a whole, for politics. Now, for me personally, though I do have, political opinions, I've mostly moved away from the realm of politics because what I've seen is that Christians do have zero intention of working with pagans or the non-religious.
And if they do, they're not real Christians. If they do, they're not real Christians. They're not acting like Christians should.
They want everything or nothing, and they even promote violence against Europeans who, don't believe as they do. And it's going to the point where, what is the definition of divisive? To divide, right? And so, I want to divide myself from a fanatic who wants to murder me, my family, and, the people I care about. I want to separate myself from those crazy people.
100%. Or wants me to believe in Jewish magical Jews and Jewish prophecies. Otherwise, I'm evil and I'm going to hell.
Right. And you'll notice this, that they'll fetishize the violence against people who don't worship, Yahweh, who don't worship Yeshua.
They'll brag that, like, throughout history that the Christians conquered the pagans, which the rabbis are celebrating also, by the way. They'll brag about that, but then they'll say, oh, follow your tradition of converting, and it was peaceful, and you just believed. It's like, no, it was coercion and force and violence and top down.
Yeah, by that same metric, they should follow the Christian tradition of today and become an atheist.
Or a Zionist.
Yeah, exactly. Because if it's top down, right, and that's how Christianity goes, you're supposed to, follow your leader, then you should follow your spiritual leaders and become Zionists, but they won't. And the fact that they won't reveals the error of their reasoning in that argument.
Yeah, they'll say another way that they frame it too is they'll try to say, like, oh, you pagans, which is like their slur is anybody that just doesn't worship the King of the Jews and believe in the Yahweh, the God of Israel. That's a pagan to them. And they'll say, oh, there's billions of Christians and only a small minority of pagans. But that's so bad faith. You should be doing how many Christians are there and how many non-Christians are there that don't fall for any of your stuff. That should be the actual thing. But also I heard you saying about how paganism and ancestral faiths are actually growing a lot.
We are growing 5 to 10 times faster than the early church did. That's the growth rate. And in fact, we're having ongoing right now. It's still ongoing. So, it's not like it's all settled, but we're having very similar theological debates that kind of the early church had, but instead of taking hundreds of years, this is taking months to a couple of years. So, the fact is that we are establishing ourselves farther and faster than early Christendom. To put this into perspective, right? Lithuania recently, this year, right? It was the last European pagan nation to convert. They just this year recognized Remuva, or the ancestral faith of the Lithuanian people, as a recognized legitimate religion. Now, that may not seem like a big step, but that is a big step in Europe, because unlike the United States and other places, they don't have freedom of religion. And you're seeing that the modern Remuva movement, if I remember correctly, and, forgive my ignorance, somebody please correct me if I'm wrong here, but the modern Remuva started around the 70s. And so you have 50 years before legal recognition, whereas Christianity in the past, it took hundreds of years for quote unquote recognition. So we're moving further and faster than them. There are more pagans in the United States than there are Lutherans in the world. So, and some people will make the claim, well, what about the fake pagans? What about the Wiccans? Well, what about the churches with gay flags? You don't view them as real Christians.
So, or all the kosher Zionists.
Add them to your numbers. Right.
Exactly.
You can't add them to your numbers either. By the way, how many of these We Was Jews churches are there? I've looked it up. There's 11, period. How many Hofs are there? Pagan Hofs. There are over 100. So yeah, as far as the We Was Jews churches, they are. And by the way, the We Was Jews Christians have been around for over 100 years.
And where have they gotten us?
Nowhere. Yep. And their entire mission was to change Christianity to be folk first, not only has it gotten nowhere, but its growth rate is absolutely abysmal. It's mainly a prison thing until they get out of prison and then stop becoming like that over time. But, the fact of the matter is that, when you're seeing Hoffs being built, when you see kindreds all over the United States, Canada, Australia, all over Europe, this is not just a fad, and it's moving quickly. In fact, I did a documentary. It's on my YouTube talking about coming home to ancestral faith. And I interviewed a guy from Eastern Europe, a guy from England, a guy from Canada, several people from all over the United States and Australia. And talking about their experiences coming home. And, guys and gals. And it was, it's a beautiful thing to see. There's so much in the pagan sphere is talking about the past, but there's not a lot of attention on what's happening right here, right now, as far as our revival. And it's just a beautiful thing to see. And like I said, we have the momentum right now.
Yeah, you're right. And we have the truth on our side. And they may still get some ratios and get a lot of likes, but then you go look in the replies and it's all of our guys with the truth, with the right arguments, dunking all over them. And that's why they're seething. That's why they're the desperation. They're flailing. They're lying. They're slandering. Hold on, we got a power chat coming
I assume Æsiric Media has family and friends in the Christian church. How often does he have to defend his decision to come home to our ancestral faith? I have an incredibly difficult time dealing with this aspect in my own life.
Thank you, Pebble. They're asking, do you have to deal with family or friends that are giving you a hard time about being a pagan?
Oh, that's a funny story. So my brother, and shout out to him, he's actually listening to this. My brother, when I took this journey, he was watching me improve very quickly after getting out of Christianity. And he was asking me about it, and instead of telling him about it like a lecture, I wanted to show him. And so I kind of showed him the same way that it was shown to me, and he follows ancestral faith. And so, and then come to find out my uncle, one of my uncles, has these types of leanings, right? Not, there's a couple family members who do. One of my cousins, several years back, had a pagan wedding, and so on. So this is growing actually very fast. And one of the things is like, most of the pushback comes from my mother, and I love my mom. I don't have any family issues, no daddy issues, no mommy issues, but at the same time, when it comes to the religious stuff,
$20
when I go to family reunions,
somewhere,
we don't talk about religious matters. And, I don't mind the fact that she's a Christian, and she has grown to accept, over time that this isn't a fad. And, she asks me questions, and the more that she learns, the more that she has, that kind of respect. And that's kind of what needs to happen in real life. You don't really see that online, though. What you see is believe as I do, or you're the enemy. But, there can be a mutual respect, and that respect comes through understanding, and also not raging, and having these like flame war debates. Because here's the deal. In pagan faiths, family is extremely important. Your ancestry is extremely important. This is like one of the top tier priorities, right? It's ancestral faith, and ancestor veneration is a core part of this. So you can't hate your family, right? That's one of the core doctrines. You can't hate your family when you do this. And contrast this with a passage from Luke. I can't remember the exact passage. I think it's 14 something. but it says you can't be my disciple unless if you hate your father and mother, unless if you hate your wife and children, unless if you hate your brothers and sisters, even your own life, you have to hate your own life, in order to be my disciple. Whereas the opposite is true. So in a way, these Christian family values, air quotes, don't come from Christianity. They come from earlier pagan holdovers, right? And when you communicate that effectively, it starts to make sense. And so there's a deeper respect going on.
I know. What kind of religion says love your enemies but hate your family and hate yourself? And then they talk about Christian family values too, right?
Yep.
I don't hate my family for being Christian. I see them as victims and addicts, actually, like Jesus junkies, addicted and brainwashed from when they were young, and they didn't have the internet, and they didn't.
Liam Jarrett sent $5. I understand Æsiric does not promote syncretism '. However, I am Irish and German and Scandinavian.
So my buddy Liam's asking about syncretism, and because he says he's Irish and German. I'm sure it is. He's Irish and German and all these mixed Europeans, which I am too, but mostly Northwestern, Anglo Viking blood. So I identify with the Nordic ones. Although the Apollonians are always talking trash, saying that like all of ours is fake and made by Jews or something. I don't know. That's probably a whole nother debate as well. But
well, I'll just summarize it in a couple short quotes, which is the fact that we can find known pre-Christian relics that depict what is being told in the legends means that they aren't just made up by Christians, because that's an accusation that Germanic faith gets all the time. Yeah. This was written down by Snorri Sturluson. This was written down by Saxo Grammaticus. This was written down by Bede, all of whom were Christians. Ipso facto, it's a Christian religion, air quotes, but that's not even true. For example, if I was to translate the Quran into English, does that make me a Muslim, or does that make Islam a pagan text? No. So, it's completely ridiculous. When the medieval monks, when they studied Greek, they actually read Homer and Hesiod, right? They read the Iliad, they read the Odyssey. Okay. When they translated that into their language as practice, does that mean that the Iliad and the Odyssey now are Christian texts? No, it's a bad faith argument made by people who want to start cults, quite frankly. Now, as far as the syncretism goes, when you look at these faiths, it becomes abundantly clear that these are ethnically distinct from one another, right? Zeus is not Odin, right? And I challenge anyone to show me this. In fact, there was a spat, a little spat not that long ago with some of these Proto-Indo-European guys, and they say things like Romulus or Remus rather is the Jotun Ymir, and that's just not even true. If you read Voluspa and you read about the foundations of the city of Rome, which is the legend that talks about Romulus and Remus, totally different. Romulus and Remus were demigods in that legend, sons of Mars. Okay. And yes, there was a fight. Yes, Romulus did kill Remus and founded the city of Rome, but he's a demigod. Whereas let's contrast that with Voluspa talking about the slaying of Ymir, where you had Odin and his three brothers who were already gods, not demigods. They were already gods. And they slayed this primordial Jotun and used his body to construct, Midgard. And so, the fact of the matter is that these are not talking about the same things. And people have tried for years and years and years to try to make all of these religions secretly fit together, because they don't view them as legends of gods and heroes. They view them as stories that change over time and location. And it's a quasi-atheistic way of looking at these legends, in my opinion.
Bolslaw asked where he can watch some of your debates. They've been on different spaces. I'm not sure if they're saved. Can you tell us more about Remuva? That's just some religion that started up, right?
Remuva is the revival for Lithuanian paganism. And they have a lot of content. It's on YouTube, so you can watch it yourself. They have a lot of great songs and dances and like festivals that they put on. And they're just lovely people. I've never gone over there to meet them. It's one of those things on my bucket list. But as far as like the debates, one of the things that I've seen now, I don't know how true this is, but there is an accusation going around that the Christians have been losing so bad that they have gotten together and mass reporting channels that host these debates. Because that original space was from an account that was mass flagged and banned, and then he brought it back, mass flagged and banned, and so on. So there's an accusation. I don't know how true that is. It could just be, the overlords at Twitter saying, shut it down. It's anti-Semitic. But, it wouldn't surprise me if there was a Christian group running around trying to mass report these debates and trying to get them shut down. By the way, when you were in the audience in that space, I remember I said, shout out to Adam Green. And but what was the quote in particular that made you want me to get on your show, if you don't mind me asking?
So I'm getting bothered by my toddler. I don't remember what the specific thing was. Just I remember listening to that space, and there was a bunch of really dumb Christians, and I was like annoyed and discouraged. And then you and I think another guy popped on, and it was just like, oh, finally somebody gets it and is exposing Christianity for the right reasons and making, speaking about paganism like in an inspiring way. So I can't remember the details exactly, but
yeah. So
I would like to get
I typically go on these debate streams Saturday evenings. So if you see the title like Ancient Gods versus Abrahamic, I'm usually in there maybe. But I do have to, I have another show planned. So I am going to just restrict it to Saturday evenings. So if you want to see me in a debate space, that's where you'll find me.
Yeah, and just follow him on Twitter, and you'll see when he's live on a space, or I'm sure he's retweeting if he's on a space or something. That's the best way to do it. They're not like set up, arranged. Would you be down for set up, arranged debates with Christians? They're not really too eager to debate any of us recently either, by the way.
No, especially after. I mean, goodness gracious, they've gone through the ringer over the last week or two.
It's rough. It's rough to be a Christian these days. It's pretty embarrassing having to defend the indefensible and Jewish myths. Christianity is holding up the Jewish myths.
Well, there's several vectors of weakness, which is the origins of Christianity itself is, the scripture is a weakness. How Christianity spread into Europe is itself a weakness. Because they acted very much like a fusion between radical Islam of today and Antifa of today. And, they were the original globalism 1.0. So they acted very much like the bad faith actors of today. And so, the fact of the matter is we could talk about those things, but mostly these conversations revolve around Christianity today and what it's doing today. For example, Austin Metcalf, right? His father, if memory serves me right, less than 24 hours after his kid was gutted, he wore a t-shirt, God above all things, GOAT, with a cross on it, and then said, I already forgive this man. And then he tries to go to a press conference with the guy who gutted his kid, not for vengeance, but to become buddies and pray with the killer of his own kid. And it's like, this is the virus. This is the mind virus of what Judeo-Christianity does to what should be good people. And then you notice things like there, for example, all the race first Christians, right? All the race first Christians are now cheering on for a black pope all of a sudden. You know, and it's just Stu Peters and his coin debacle. I didn't catch up with it after the first day, but after I saw it, it looked very much like a rug pull scam. From the first day's charts anyway. Like I said, I haven't checked up on it recently, but I mean, goodness gracious.
What else are meme coins? What else? How else do meme coins end, right?
Yeah, just name it Hawk2a 2.0. You know, just be straight up about it.
Christians have a real tough time in these debates because they have to defend Christianity too, like establishment Christianity, and all the top of all the denominations is so kosher and so, you know, multicultural and diverse and pro-Israel, so they have to defend that. And this is what bugs me, is that we clearly have a huge Christian problem, right? That's the term everybody needs to be talking about. The Christian problem, the Christian question. And we're trying to address it. And all of these internet Christians, e-crusaders, they're like the first line of defense. They're trying to sweep and make excuses, and they're actually enabling all of it. And it's really pathetic how all of these internet Christians will spend all their time making memes about pagans or trying to like attack pagans when they don't even go to church, and their churches would disavow them, and their churches are like one of the biggest problems out there. So they're literally suggesting more of the problem is the solution.
Exactly. So they will not call out the fact that 6 of the 10 major resettlement organizations are Christians. They only focus on the Jewish one or the secular ones. But like I said, 60% of the major resettlement organizations are Christians. They don't bring this up. They don't bring up the fact that, well, sometimes they will, like in closed circles, they will say like, oh, you know, the churches are infiltrated or they're corrupted and stuff. But that directly violates their own scripture, where it says that the gates of hell won't prevail against the church. Well, it did. Ipso facto, it's not true. Oh, no, that's not true. And then you have, there was a meme, it was a couple months ago, but I'll send it to you after the show, where they, in their own chat rooms, they will talk about pagans 3 to 10 times more than Jesus himself, which is curious. So really, it's just, it's not only LARP, but this anti-pagan stuff is usually out of jealousy. The fact that people are rejecting the Ziocon and the Christian delusion.
And that's one of the biggest things they ever say is the LARP. They're accusing us of being LARPing. Like, no, we should LARP as Israelites. It's better. Like they want us to LARP as Israelites and spiritual Jews. Like, we're trying to LARP as our own people, and they'll go, you're in the woods drinking Odin's cum, and just saying the worst straw mans ever.
Dude,
it's so bad faith.
The funniest part about that is that comes from a book written by a Jewish individual, and in that exact same book, I think it's something titled like The Origins of Homosexuality or something. In that same book that says Odin drank cum, it also talks about Jesus having gay orgy with his disciples. Okay, so it's absolutely hilarious that, number one, they would have to use a pro-homosexual propaganda piece to defame ancestral faith, but they're using the same work that disparages their own religion, and all religions, by the way. So it's funny,
and it's just so bad faith to like portray us as like, you know, as if we're out, you know, doing LARPing stuff or something. And not that there's anything wrong with that. Like, people that really need spirituality, like, have your winter solstice celebration and feast, have your winter one, whatever. Who doesn't like holidays and festivals and banquets and dinners and getting together with your family and community? Like, everybody likes that. And we even still have the ones that we have today were originally pagan or completely blended in with pagan stuff, just tried to put a Jesus stamp over most of them anyway.
That's 100% correct. And, here's kind of the thing. The fact of the matter is that these are coming from individuals who do LARP as Christians. Mm-hmm. Okay. These are people who don't go to church. These are people who don't pray regularly. These are people who never even read their own Bible.
Yeah.
Okay. So ironically, and this is what I've come to realize the more that I debate with Christians, is that they will do a Saul Alinsky tactic, which is accuse others that which yourself is guilty. And they will do this on a regular basis. So they'll say things like a human sacrifice, right? The pagans did human sacrifice.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, their entire religion is based around a human sacrifice.
Yeah.
Okay. And they'll say things like, you're
chasing bears in the woods, something like that. That's E. Michael
your gods
Jones,
are
right?
demons.
Yeah,
your gods are demons.
Who told you that? Oh, the Jews? Okay.
Yeah, meanwhile...
Yeah. But you believe the rabbis, they'll say. You believe the rabbis, but your white gods are demons. Okay.
Oh, and you're Jewish if you don't worship Yeshua. Meanwhile, in their own book, it says you're grafted into the Jewish line if you worship Yeshua. So they call themselves the new Jews, the new Israel. So it's absolutely hilarious. Everything that they accuse ancestral faith, they themselves are guilty. Everything. So I don't take their points of criticism seriously. And neither should any other thinking person.
Yeah, I don't either. It's just it's weird when we see all of these posts exploding on Twitter all the time. It's like the more nonsense it is, the more viral it goes somehow. I'm sure there's nothing sus going on there, right? Hey, did you see the new Netflix show where it had it was about Norse mythology and then it ended with Odin bowing down and like seeing the church and Jesus conquer him?
So I will tell you that I haven't been to the movies or watched Netflix in years.
Well, I posted it. How long have you known about me, by the way? I posted it.
So I've known about you for, goodness gracious, going on like since 2019.
Oh, cool.
So like right before the COVID times. Mm-hmm. And I work for a living, so of course it's difficult to catch up on all the streams. But I've been watching on and off for quite a few years.
Awesome.
Your research. I mean, goodness gracious, the amount of deep dives you've gone into and exposing like the clips, just the raw clips. Mm-hmm. I'm curious as to do people like forward you these clips, or do you research them yourself? Like, how do you gather these clips?
Until recently, now I've got friends and like, part of our crew are doing it and making their own edits, like See Through It All and John. And there's been other accounts that go and find clips, but it used to just be me watching them at 2x, like watching all the rabbi videos to clip up to make these compilations. I would do it, but thankfully, especially since like I've had the kids, not as much anymore of putting them all together. But it would be also that people would see them and then send me the timestamp, send me the link and the timestamp if you see something good. And but yeah, it's been huge. And then these idiot Christians, like the stupid accusations they'll throw at me. They'll say, "Oh, you don't expose Jews." It's like, have you not seen the rabbi compilations that all you Christians are stealing and cropping out the logos and reposting with your subversive message of Christianity most of the time? It's like all I've been doing is exposing Jews and Judaism and Zionism and spiritual Jews, which are Christians. Exposing Christianity is exposing Jews. Christians uphold Jewish supremacy, Jewish theological supremacy.
Yes. And it's also hilarious that they will accuse you of being Jewish, even though you have, released your DNA.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I could just look at you and tell.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But you look at like Stu Peters. Have you ever seen Stu Peters' side profile, by the way?
Mm-hmm. I have. Yeah.
Have you seen Corey Muller,
you can do
like that
mm-hmm.
family history of the Muller surname?
I have. Yeah, I heard it's Ashkenazi as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's absolutely hilarious that they will, like I said, exactly. They will accuse you that which they themselves are guilty.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. They're spiritual Jews. Yeah, I've shown my DNA for years. I've shown videos of me as a young kid singing "Jesus Loves Me." I'm 6'4" with blonde hair and blue eyes. Was raised Christian. Green is an Anglo, Irish, English, Scottish name. The DNA's out there. My kids are like little Aryan princesses, Viking princesses with like white blonde hair. And then the only retort, they won't ever address any of the information or the claims. They just lie and slander and come up with conspiracies and call Jewish. That's how disgraceful these detractors are.
Well, it's kind of like also the old saying from Mark Twain. A lie can go halfway around the world before the truth can lace up its boots. And that's 100% true. And that's why they spread lies all the time. They have to. By the way, in Romans, it even says, I think it's 3:19, if I remember correctly, though I may be mistaken on the verse. But it is in Romans 3. It says, if my lie, this is Paul talking, if my lie advances God's glory, why should I be judged a sinner? And then it talks about how I caught you with trickery. Mm-hmm. Right. And sending forth a powerful delusion so that they will believe the lie. All of this is in the New Testament by Paul, by the way. And so, they have to lie, and that's just the way that it is. But we're catching them and we're exposing it at such a fast rate that they just can't keep up anymore. Unlike the olden times, we can outmaneuver them by calling them out whenever they make a false claim, make a false allegation, and expose them.
Yeah, I think we're going to see a domino effect, a snowball effect too, as more and more influencers have the courage and feel safe enough that they can finally speak about Christianity like they would like to. Because we know a lot of them are biting their tongues. They're scared of losing, anywhere from like half to 80% of their audiences and their supporters. So they're worried about that. And as soon as they see that it's safe, a lot more people are going to do it. And then I'm sure a lot more people are going to get in the game like yourself too. Apparently, because I've only just heard of you recently. You got, your account is March 2025. So you're basically like brand new. And your YouTube channel, you got 3 videos. Were you under other names? Were you making content or like?
So I've been in the scene for a while, but I didn't make a YouTube video and started, going on X and stuff like that until relatively recently. Mm-hmm. And that's mainly because, part of what I want to do is to, promote ancestral faith as is, because there's a lot of goofy theories running around, and a lot of folks who are very genuine about ancient faith and ways. They look at all of these weird ideas and they say, somebody's got to say something. Somebody's got to do something. And in that particular space, I think I followed you in there because I remember when I joined Twitter, I gave you a follow, and I saw this space at the top called Ancient Gods versus Abrahamic. And, I said, well, I'll give it a listen. Why not? And nobody was giving the side for the quote unquote ancient gods. And I was like, well, I'll change that. Mm-hmm. And after that, a lot of people were, impressed. And it's a real shame because there's been people, even my own brother, who was like, hey, can I listen to that space? And I'm like, I unfortunately, I think it's lost because the guy's channel was nuked, but at the same time, it's like, I've been doing shows for a while. I've been making promotional art pieces for a while, inspirational videos. And somebody came up to me and said, you should do that, but for the faith that you love. And I said, yeah, I'll do it. Not a problem. And, inspired me to make a YouTube channel. So I made a YouTube channel, and here I am.
And that channel, guys, is Æsiric Media, Æsiric Media, to find that. And Liam has a question here. Thank you, Liam. Says, what rituals or ceremonies do you do for funerals and weddings?
So I want to say right out the bat that I'm not a Gothi. I'm not going to pretend to be. But as far as heathen weddings, I have been to 2. And, it essentially follows the old way, except there's one thing in particular that's very beautiful, which is there's an oath ring. And you pass your rings through this oath ring, and you hold hands through this oath ring and take the oath to one another. And of course, you swear, to the gods and goddesses, the ancestors, that you're gonna be together, and help each other and guide each other through. And as far as funerals go, I'm currently in talks with Keith Osgood, who is a scholar. He's a bona fide scholar, but he also follows ancestral faith. Same thing with Dr. Scott Shell, as well as others. There's a great group called the Neurona Society. They have a Twitter, and they're on Telegram, and they put out a lot of informational content in relation to those. So if you're interested in kind of the peculiars of how this ritual was done, they will be happy to give you all the sources. So
what do you think of Asatru?
Asatru, so there's two variations, I should say. Asatru is Icelandic for true to the Aesir, and it was part of a Icelandic faith revival movement in Iceland, and they've been killing it. As far as like I think the numbers are, at last I recall, though I may be mistaken, so do forgive me for this, but I think it's somewhere around a quarter of all Iceland follows ancestral faith now.
Based.
So 1 out of 4. They're building a massive temple complex over there in Reykjavik. Now, Asatru in the United States, the most famous one is the Asatru Folk Assembly. This is the widest spread. It's a collection of different kindreds so it's kind of like a confederation, as it were, of different kindreds all over the United States who, follow the old gods under the writings and teachings of Stephen McNallen and Matt Fovell, who's the current leader of the Asatru Folk Assembly. So this is kind of like the history lesson of what's going on. But as far as like Asatru in America, it's been around since the 60s. So this isn't like something that just popped up with the Vikings TV show. This has been going on for decades.
Speaking of the Vikings TV show, final question, and then I got to get going. And we'll have to do this again. You're welcome to come to a panel. I'll get you on with some other pagans for the big revival.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, of course. In the Netflix show and in the Northman, they both have them taking mushrooms as part of their spirituality. You have a take on magic mushrooms and paganism?
So I do have a take on it, and it's going to be a unique take. So bear with me here for a second. So the fact of the matter here is ancestral faith is not about taking drugs. Okay. It's not an excuse or a reason to, get high and things of this nature. Now, were these substances used in the past? Sometimes, but not all the time. And if ancestral faith is anything to go by, Odin himself in the Havamal talks about alcohol, right? And he says, don't be a drunkard, but also don't be a prude, live your life a little bit. Now, here's the deal. When it comes to faith ways today and revival, I think that we need to be serious and sober when we're having these rituals. I think that that's a great way to go. At the same time, I understand that how it was described to me is that our minds have a kind of shield, and this shield blocks you from seeing things and hearing things that you would normally just ignore. It kind of lowers your defenses, your mental defenses, so that you can see things and interact with things that you normally wouldn't be able to. Okay. I'm not against it, but at the same time, ancestral faith should not, it should be professional. It should be,
but if the ancestors did it, do we know how the ancestors did it?
We have descriptions of these celebrations where they would be communally feasting, where they would be dancing, where they would be singing. We know what they ate because normally they ate parts of the animal that was sacrificed. So if they sacrificed a cow, right, fresh meat is the best meat. When they sacrificed a cow, they would give some of the meat to the gods and the spirits of that land, and then they'd pass the rest of, they cook the meat and pass it around so that everybody could eat. In fact, even in the Bible, it talks about this, right? Don't eat meat that was given to an idol and stuff like that. So none of those descriptions talk about, oh, you got to take a bunch of dabs before you start. None of those descriptions talk about getting high or having copious amounts of drugs. If they did, they would, because they talk about alcohol and alcohol being present there. They don't talk about a lot of drugs being present there. So the fact that we know that they did it on occasion indicates that it was rare, if not used at all. Now, alcohol on the other hand, we know was used.
Mead would be the alcohol.
Mead would be a very expensive type of alcohol. So keep in mind, like northern Scandinavia, it's really cold and there's not a lot of fruit trees, a lot of flowers. And you really have to take care of your bees. Right. So they would import honey from other places to brew the mead. In Italy, right, and in Greece, they used wine. Right. And so on. So these alcoholic, and by the way, even in ancient Egypt, tons of beer, tons of wine. Okay. And so, the fact of the matter is that alcohol was the drink of choice, not just because of its, slightly intoxicating effects, as anyone who's read about Dionysus could tell you that. But you're also talking about it's safe to drink because that alcohol purifies the water. It makes it safe to. Whereas if you drink water from the stream and, somebody went to the bathroom in there, then you could get very sick and die. Yeah. So alcohol was seen as kind of like a magical substance. In fact, so much so that the Romans had a saying that they used all the time: in vino veritas, meaning in wine there's truth. Like you're kind of like an 8-year-old. You say things that under normal circumstances you may want to hide, but you open up more.
Truth serum. It's a natural truth serum. Yeah,
of course.
It's better for parties too and celebrations than mushrooms would be.
Oh, hell yeah.
But is that real though? I was just curious. I had no idea because that is in the movie and then the Netflix show or the whatever
they
it was.
want to make that association to make paganism look like it's just a bunch of crazed people on drugs, and that's just not true. Now, did they drink a lot? Oh yeah, and we know that from the sources. But as far as the sources talking about copious amounts of drugs, it does talk about drugs. So like the Greeks, they have cookbooks where they talk about making edibles. Mm-hmm. That's not a joke. That's real. But they didn't eat them all the time. It was kind of like a cool recreational treat. And the weed back then, I can imagine, wasn't nearly as strong as today. Not even close. But the fact of the matter is that drugs were mentioned. Like the Egyptians used opium, for surgeries and pain relief, and sometimes people would smoke the opium. There are depictions of pharaohs smoking out of a pipe. So the fact is that drugs were in the ancient world, but they weren't the religion, and they weren't based on the religion like you'd find in Joe Rogan, where everything's secretly talking about magic mushrooms.
DMT. Yeah, everything's DMT secretly. Well, I was just curious because it's in those the Viking shows and the movies, and I've never seen any verification of that they were even doing mushrooms, and in what capacity. If it was I would imagine if they were, it would be like, okay, the priests are about to do this and they're going to go talk to the gods, and like that would be their spiritual visionary type of thing.
So there are some hypotheses about this, like, for example, the Oracle of Delphi. Some people say where she was positioned was over a geothermal crack where there would be these methane gases that would come up, and she would babble all sorts of things, and it would be interpreted by the priests and so on. Those are hypotheses. But here's the thing, when it comes to like the actual source material, the pagans were not ashamed of drugs like people are today. And if they did use them, they wrote about it. So the fact that they don't write about it should tell you that it probably wasn't as big of a thing as these propagandists want to. They want to make paganism look silly, in other words.
I wasn't even sure if mushrooms even grew up there, and if they were even picking them and knew about them.
They grow out of cow manures, and they had plenty of cattle. In fact, Fehu, the rune Fehu, is representative of a cow, because that's how people had wealth before coinage. They would use livestock to count wealth. So, and because cattle were a big thing, and psilocybin mushrooms grow out of cow manure, it only makes sense that they would come across it.
Right. Okay, let me tell you, we're going to do these super chats, and I got to get going, guys. You got to get the kids ready for bed. We'll do this again for sure. It would be cool to have you on a panel. Can you hear this super chat or this power chat?
I could hear the ding, but I can't.
$5. Hey, been watching your show for about 2 months now. I just want to say thank you so much for your hard work exposing the Abrahamic scam. I hope someday Christianity falls and we get our traditions back in place. Native Americans have given me hope.
Native Americans, huh? Yeah, I saw you talking about that with Henrik too, and that's a great way to end. Is I would love to be. Why am I doing this fight? Even though I'm kind of black-pilled a lot of time, and it feels like we're up against incredible odds, and everybody's brainwashed by Jewish myths. I'm going to keep fighting just for the chance that we could be like the generation and the movement that finally liberates us from Yahweh, from the shackles of Yahweh and his chosen people. So.
Oh, it's inbound. And by the way, even if it doesn't happen in our lifetime, how I view this is kind of like the ancient Greek proverb of, we plant the tree so that our children and our grandchildren can sit in the shade. Our job right now, at least how I see it, is to lay down the foundation stones. Even though we may never be able to step foot in that grand temple, we're going to lay it down anyway so that our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren will. And that gives our life meaning and purpose and joy, and not thinking that the world is going to end next Tuesday, right? So why even do anything? In fact, like some of the early Christian debates were, why even have children if the world's going to end tomorrow anyway?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
the death cult apocalyptic aspect of it for sure is bad. Or sitting around waiting for a Messiah to come in and save you. The pagans aren't saying, hey, Thor's going to come back and defeat those Jews one day. Like,
no.
That's...
We have a duty and a responsibility to live honorably, nobly, in accordance with our gods as well as our ancestors. Mm-hmm. And, you know, in Germanic faith, you come back through your ancestral line. So your children are your ancestors reborn. And that gives them a great importance, right? Mm-hmm. And not only this, but it gives an importance as far as like, you know, continuing life and making that life worth living. That's a key factor.
Right. I agree. And yeah, with my daughter, please close the door. I'm going to raise my daughter pagan, antichrist pagan. So all the Christians can seethe on that.
There you go.
Æsiric, thank you so much for coming on. We'll have to do this again. Tell everybody where they can find you.
It was a pleasure, Adam. Thank you for inviting me on. And so you can find me on X at Æsiric Media. You can find me on Telegram, t.me/Æsiric, and that's AESIRIC. And YouTube as well, Æsiric Media. And I do the AE separate just because, you know, keyboards are a thing and not everybody has that ash. But yeah, you'll find me on YouTube, Telegram, and on X.
Cool. Thanks a lot. We'll do it again. Thanks everybody for the support tonight. I will see you guys again tomorrow. And I can't wait to see what you all have to say in the comments as well. So everybody take care, and we'll be in touch. Thank you, Æsiric. Keep up the good work.
Thank you. You as well.
All right. Take care. Thank you, everybody. Great show. Enjoyed the talk. Very cool. Down with Yahweh. Hail the old gods. And I will see you guys very soon. Take care. Let's go out with the super uber pagan outro, actually.